The information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional regarding your individual health needs. Let's talk about peptides because they're not just GLP-1s. Your body actually makes peptides naturally. They're messengers that help regulate things like fat metabolism, muscle growth, skin health, recovery, and energy. But here's the truth. Just like hormones, collagen, and muscle, peptide production declines as we age, especially postmenopause. So if you're feeling stuck, belly fat that won't budge, slower recovery, low energy, or skin that just isn't bouncing back like it used to, this might be a missing piece. And no, this isn't about shortcuts. Lifestyle still comes first. Strength training, protein, sleep, stress management, always. But peptides can be a smart layer on top of that foundation. Not interested in a GLP-1? Totally fine. There are other options that support fat metabolism, recovery, cognitive function, and healthy aging. The key is quality and working with a trusted medical provider. That's why I've partnered with LEMD to bring you clinically guided, personalized peptide options that actually make sense for midlife women. And if you're curious, check the link in the show notes and learn what might be right for you. Health, wellness, fitness, and everything in between. We're removing the taboo from what really matters in midlife. I'm your host, Michele Folan, and this is Asking for a Friend. If you've reached your 50s or 60s, and life feels quieter than you imagined. The kids are grown. The calendar isn't as chaotic. Work life feels routine. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a little voice is asking, is this all there is? I saw something last week that stopped me. It suggested taking a moment to imagine your 80-year-old self looking back at you right now and asking her, what do you wish I'd been brave enough to do? What risk should I take? Which dreams are still worth chasing? That hit me really hard because midlife isn't the closing chapter. It's the editing phase. It's the revision. It's where we decide whether we're going to shrink or expand. And that's exactly why I'm so excited for today's conversation. Angela Burk, author of The Real Girl's Guide to Midlife, isn't talking about crisis. She's talking about awakening, about chaos, about personality reboots and grieving who you were and choosing who you're becoming. This isn't about chasing your 30-year-old body. It's about building the woman your 80-year-old self will thank you for becoming. Angela Burk, welcome to Asking for a Friend.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction.
Well, thank you. Thanks. I really was looking forward to this conversation for a lot of reasons. But last week when I saw that quote about imagining you being your 80-year-old self, it really hit home because what does that 80-year-old person really wish we were doing at this phase of life? So good segue into this conversation, I think. And I want to talk about you a little bit before your wonderful book, The Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. Who were you professionally and what were you building then?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So professionally, I had spent 30 years in high-tech marketing. I worked for a really long time, lots of different companies. I built things, I fixed things, I solved problems. And you know, I loved my career. I put a lot of my identity into the way I worked, the relationships that I established, the credibility that I generated through my work. And what's funny, though, about this book is I actually had this book idea when I was 35. So I was in the middle of my career and I had probably a few different career crossroads, right? Where you sort of get to a career point and you can kind of go left. That's right. You can kind of go right or you can go left. And so I was 35 and I was sort of at a career crossroads. I was a mom. I had two of my three boys at that time. I was in my marriage. You know, things were starting to shift for me hormonally. I didn't really know it 20 years ago. I don't think I knew what perimenopause was for sure. And I was feeling just angsty. and confused. And I was looking around and I'm like, everybody seems to have their stuff together. It's got to be me. I'm the crazy one. I'm not grateful enough. The problem is me. So I started to shape this book and I put everything that I had, ideas that I had, into a red folder. And literally and figuratively, that folder got buried. So, a lot happened for me career-wise, in my personal life over that 20-year period. But after a 30-year marketing career, which is just obscene to say, it's absurd to me, but I had the good fortune of retiring. And when I was cleaning out my desk, I had a small pile right on my desk of just stuff. I found the folder is basically what happened. And I opened it and I was like, well, look at that. Turns out I still have a lot of questions. Turns out I still feel at a crossroads. Turns out some of the subjects that I thought I was so confused about, I now am not, which is good. I learned something, but now I have a whole host of new things that I'm confused about. So, I gave myself a few months to sort of decide, can I write the book? Should I write the book? Who am I to think I could write a book? I'm not a writer. And the good news is that, I lived a lot of my life with those talk tracks in my head forever. And now I'm at this age where they still creep in, but I can short circuit them. And I did. And so I gave myself 2 months and then I decided, well, why the hell not? So I wrote the book.
Yeah, I think that's great. And some people wait even longer. So, I think that's what's so funny about this is that, I know I've had guests on the show, they're in their 60s and they finally said, I think I'm going to write the book, so.
I think I'm going to write the book. And it was about doing something. And, you mentioned something about the quote that you saw, what would your 80-year-old self go back and tell us now? One of the reasons why writing the book was so important to me is, I say a lot of things to my boys, right? And I try to give these, little mantras, or I call them momtras, and these little, and they roll their eyes for sure. But I want to think that they sink in. But a couple of them, and a lot of them have to do with, you don't just talk the talk, you got to walk your talk. And one of them is, we finish what we start.
I love it.
And the second one is, you're going to be able to take a lot of risks in life. Always bet on yourself. And so I realized that being able to show them that I was going to take this brave step, that I was going to do something that I had sat on for 20 years, that I was going to finish something that I started, and that I was betting on myself was really important to me. So those were the other reasons why I decided to write the book.
Are they proud of you?
Very proud of me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
And it's funny because there's a chapter in the book, because I get very real. So when I say that it's the Real Girl's Guide, a lot of it is my stories, other women's stories and experts, but I get very real. So there's one chapter in the book that talks about desire and pleasure. And I'll just say that, I'm very honest about my own relationship with those things. So in the chapter of the book, I have 3 warnings, because in addition to me, I was in a long-term marriage. I divorced. I found new love when I was in my mid-40s. That brought on a whole new set of discoveries, but also introduced 4 additional children into our combined mix. So in this one chapter, though, I have 3 warnings for the children. As, in the off chance they're going to actually pick up the book and read it. I'm like, hey, you might want to throw the book. Just close it and throw it. In the middle, it's like, are you still here? And then the end is like, if you children stuck this out, you're going to see a whole new version of Angela and your mother. And all I can say is you're welcome, because I am a whole person. And, no apologies, no trying to sugarcoat it. But if they stuck it out, it's like, okay, hopefully this serves you well later in life. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, I got to back up, because I think this is kind of important. I don't think our children really see us as a whole person until maybe they're adults. And even then, I think it really depends on how much you let your kids see. Because I know people that are very reserved and don't let their children see that whole side of them. And I think that's a shame.
I agree with you completely. And here's why. If I think about it, right, and many of us women, and also men too, but I'm going to come from the perspective of women. We spend a lot of our life living and acting by the stories that other people tell about us, or the stories we tell about ourselves. And most of those stories deal with some amount of shrinking or editing or keeping the peace, or carrying the load or not making waves and being the small, the quiet, the steady, the unflappable, the fixer, all these things. And what I am trying to do with my boys in particular is sort of say like, look, your mom spent the better part of her life playing that part. And what is happening to me now is, you kind of talked about this concept of editing, and the way I sort of describe it is I had to edit myself for a lot of years, right? Because I was the one that everybody turned to and relied on, and somehow told myself that my happiness could never come first. God forbid my happiness came first. Everybody around me would suffer. That's a messed up story. But what I'm trying to model for my boys is, we teach people how to treat us. And if we're going to edit ourselves, like that's our doing. And I want my kids to see that, yes, I am their mom, but also I am a happy version of Angela that they didn't know when they were younger and I was still married, that their mother has desires and wants and fears and, pride in her accomplishments. She's embracing the discomfort. She's trying new things. I just signed up for drum lessons. Okay. And my kids are like, I'm sorry, you're doing what? I'm like, I'm taking drum lessons. And they're like, you know what? Cool.
Yeah.
And so I want them to see that there is an element of bravery and risk that comes with being your whole person. And I don't want them to have to edit themselves. Like you show up at work and, there's certain roles that we have to play for sure. But I am a whole person here. And, and I'm not apologetic about it.
Yeah. I think this is so great because you're what, 54?
55.
And you're taking drum lessons.
I'm taking drum lessons. I'm 6 weeks into it and I'm loving it. And, do I have visions of opening some concert? No, but I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it for me.
Yeah. As well you should.
Yeah.
You open with welcome to the chaos club. And is midlife chaotic because of hormones or because we finally stopped tolerating what no longer fits?
Yes. And yes. I think that it is. So, I don't know about you, but I remember, being raised with this idea of the midlife crisis, right?
Yeah.
And and my mom and I are 19 years apart. So we're quite close. And I remember as she was going through some of these periods of transition for her. And I, being in my 20s and she was in her 40s, and I was like, ooh, that's old lady stuff. Like I wanted to create so much distance from myself and her and the concept of midlife or, some kind of impending doom that was like coming and all these changes that were happening. I was like, oh my God, that's so gross. And so I think a lot of us are raised to fear, and believe that this period of time, and there's no magic. It's not like you look at midlife and go, oh, it's your 40s or it's your 30s or, oh, it's your 50s. There's no magic decade. But I think that it is chaotic. It doesn't mean it's a crisis. It doesn't mean you're falling apart. It doesn't mean that your world's going to open up and swallow you whole, but it means that a lot of things are changing. And yes, is it hormones? 100%. Yes, is it because we're finally becoming intolerant and exhausted with having to carry the loads and play the role that we've been playing for decades and decades? Yes. Is it chaotic because we're maybe redefining what right or normal looks like and feels like? Yes. Is it chaotic because we're dealing with all the appearance changes and all the things that are like in turmoil? Yes. Is it chaotic because a lot of the roles that we used to have are shifting? Yes. Is it chaotic because we're trying to rediscover parts of ourselves that have been lost? Yes. So you kind of keep adding it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's super chaotic. But chaos is it's like the word crisis. Chaos is not bad.
Yeah. And I remember back probably in my mid 40s, not sleeping, maybe late 40s, not sleeping and just not, and feeling really anxious at times. Mm-hmm. And I wish we knew at that time what all this was. And we have a lot more information now
Yeah.
than we ever have. You know, the distinction between perimenopause and menopause and all those body changes that come with it. You know, there's 30 or 40 different symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. I mean, come on, we didn't know any of this stuff. And you know, you say that it's not a hot flash, it's a personality reboot, which just cracks me up. But you reframe that narrative completely. What other changes in midlife do women often get mislabeled?
I think we get a lot of changes mislabeled, right? I think even if I go back and look at my 40s were probably the decade so far that has been the most change filled. Because all these things were happening at one time, right? So we get mislabeled because, oh my gosh, like she's losing her mind. You know, she must be going crazy. No. Oh my gosh, like why, she's complaining about her marriage, or she's complaining about her kids, or she's complaining about her job. You know, she's ungrateful. No. Oh, so you kind of take all of these changes that we're going through, and it's very easy and a lot of that mislabeling starts with us. Mm-hmm. I know if I go back and look at my 40s, I had no idea how close I was to actually becoming postmenopausal when I was about 45. I had no idea. I divorced, and it wasn't like this big dramatic divorce, but we, my kid's dad and I looked at each other, both realized we could be happier. And that's not how I wanted to live. I didn't want to model for my boys that the best relationship that you should seek out is somebody who looks at you and says, I could be happier someplace else. Nah. Again, another career crossroads. I took a massive career risk in changing jobs. And then the backdrop of all that were the hormone stuff. So it felt like I was losing my mind half the time. And so I think that a lot of, and when you're in it, I believe that the mislabeling, I was probably the most guilty at mislabeling a lot of this stuff because I didn't stop and look at what was happening. And I didn't have the knowledge to say, man, those hormones are really driving a lot of this. Or, hey, you're not sleeping and you're anxious. Because I looked at that and I went, well, of course I'm anxious and I'm not sleeping. I'm working 14 hours a day. I'm trying to establish myself as a single mom. I'm trying to make sure my boys are situated. I'm worried about them. I'm worried about, of course I'm not sleeping. So it was easy for me to justify and rationalize all of these things that I was feeling, in particular at that time, as being, a symptom of a circumstance. And then I was looking around and I'm like, I'm not the only one going through this stuff, but why does everybody else seem to be so good at this?
Yeah.
So that I must be the crazy one. I must be the one that doesn't know how to do this right. I must be the one that's doing it wrong. And so the mislabeling, I believe, and it was that kind of belief was validated through a lot of the women that I spoke to for the book. Yes, the outside world can mislabel all of this stuff, but I think sometimes we're the worst offenders because we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah, we are. But there is this point that I think we get to where we become more honest. And I think that honesty can make other people really uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly our kids. Because
yes.
not sugarcoating things anymore, where it's, you worry less about, you want people to know the truth and worry less about hurting people's feelings. Because it
is very uncomfortable. I think honesty does rattle people,
mm-hmm.
And I think discomfort rattles people. I think change rattles people. I think different rattles people. So when whether it's with your kids or your partner or your boss or your friends or your family, when you show up different, when you show up with some attitude changes, when you show up stripping away some of the layers that they're so used to seeing that make them all comfortable, it rattles people. People don't like that.
No, they don't.
People don't like it. And then the backdrop though to all that is, and the science says this, right? So some of the hormones that are so prevalent in us when we're in our 20s and 30s, when we're young and in our 20s and 30s and 40s until we get to menopause, they're meant to keep us soft, right? They're meant to keep us nurturing and, huggable. And so you come at a lot of these circumstances with just sheer exhaustion. You come at it with a new realization. You come at it with brutal honesty, and the hormones that have kept you that way are leaving the building. It's like, of course you're going to be different. Like, you're biologically different. You're chemically different. And people don't like that.
Yeah. We're going to continue this conversation after the break. Angela, we'll be right back. Quick pause for a second. If you've been listening to this podcast and thinking, oh my gosh, my friend needs to hear this, don't keep it to yourself. Seriously. So many women out there are trying to figure this stuff out alone. Health, hormones, aging, all of it. And half the time, we don't even know where to start. That's exactly why I created this podcast. So if something you've heard today resonated with you, send it to a friend, a sister, your workout buddy, that woman you were just talking to about perimenopause over coffee. Because these conversations, they matter. And the more women we bring into this space, the better we all get. All right, let's get back to the episode. All right, we are back. We've talked about hormones, and I think there is this confusion about hormones and just how much is just us getting older, like how much is existential, this whole change. I mean, our libido changes, our vaginas change. I mean, everything is changing. How do we get women to understand about hormones that might reduce shame and self-blame at this point in the game?
I mean, you nailed a concept that I think is really important here. It is wired into us early on that things that change are a failure. And with a failure, with this belief, if that's the belief we hold, that if something changes, whether it's our libido is changing, our appearance is changing, our relationship is changing, our careers are changing, whatever it is, change equals failure. Failure comes with it shame, guilt, embarrassment, fear, all these things. And I think the only way that we can sort of, you have to have the ability to sort of pause and go, okay, something is different. Different is not bad. Different is just different. And there is no need for me to feel guilt and shame. And like, if I'm feeling these things, let me call them out. But now what am I going to do different? And one of the things I'll share a story of what happened with me. So I was writing this book, right? So I started writing in April of 24. I was like June, July, I was writing the book, and I also started a Substack. I was interviewing experts for the book, and I noticed I was suffering from a libido change. So my background is I started perimenopause very early. I was in my late 30s. I entered menopause, kind of became postmenopausal at 47. So I think a little on the early side. And I raw dogged the entire thing. So no hormones for me at any point. So fast forward, I'm writing this book. I'm talking to an expert. It's all about the time that the FDA did the panel discussion on vaginal estrogen cream and removing the black box label. I listened to that. I've never done that before in my life. A government panel. I've never listened to that. But I was talking to an expert, and all the while I was noticing a libido change in myself. And I couldn't talk to my man about it because I didn't understand what was happening. He noticed it. I noticed it. And it was like a subject that, we would kind of talk about, and he'd be like, oh, is it a problem with us? And I'm like, no, and I don't know what's happening, and I don't really want to talk about it. And then at the same time, like, my bladder was changing. So I was like, just nothing felt sexy. And I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. So all of this is happening. I talked to an expert, and, we're sort of talking about this, the vaginal estrogen cream. And I go to my doctor, and I'm telling her what's happening. And she's like, it really sucks, doesn't it? And I thought, that's the best you can. And then she says to me, she knows that my partner lives in Australia. I live in California. And she says to me, I think you and your man need to go on more dates.
Oh.
And I'm like, you do know we don't live in the same country. So, and I promise this story is going to wrap up. But at about the same time, I started reading Miranda July's book, All Fours. Fictional book, kind of smutty. I loved it. My partner happened to be in California at that time. He started reading it. We like to read the same books. He has to fly to London, and I'm ahead of him in the book. But there's a chart in this book, okay? And the chart it's a fictional book. I just want to preface this. And the chart is It's got estrogen and testosterone, men and women by decade, and it plots the levels of these hormones. And basically what it shows is women have a plummet of estrogen, usually right around 45. We have very little testosterone, and even that plummets. Where men, they have more of these hormones, and their decline is really like this little meandering, little slow, steady, quiet, calm. So my man gets off the plane. He calls me from the Aero Bridge and he says to me, "Did you get to the chart?" And I said, "Well, I'm past the chart." He says, "Babe, I am so sorry," because that chart explained to him why I was suffering and why my libido changed. And it gave me the ability to talk to him in a way that I couldn't talk to him before. And it also prompted me to go talk to a doctor. I got started on hormones, and things are better. They're not like, it's not sexy time, fun time all the time, but things are better. But the long and short of it is, like, there is so much confusion and guilt and shame and embarrassment that come with even a libido change.
Yeah.
And then you try to seek out help and you get the gaslighting and you and your partner need to go on more dates. But and I had to find language for this in a fictional book.
Yeah.
But I did.
Yeah. I think some of this is a choice. Like if you decide that it's not that important to you, that you don't want to get the help, I think that's a choice. And I think some women,
it's a choice.
Some women decide to do that. I felt the need to get help with my hormones because I was missing that in my life. And Angela, this is interesting. So I interviewed a functional medicine, integrative health doctor, and we were talking about vaginal estrogen, but he said, what women often forget is that a lot of their external sex organs, clitoris, labia, is they're the same tissue that a penis is.
Yeah.
And that it's made of testosterone, and that we need that testosterone, not just for libido, but for our health of our sexual organs.
Oh, yeah.
External ones. And I was like, no one's ever really brought that up to me before on the podcast, but I just thought that was interesting. So it's not just estrogen. We got to pay attention to testosterone and progesterone, but
100%.
We could talk about that all day.
We could. But one of the things I also want to draw out about what you said is, it is a choice, right? And the choice is ours. So take libido, take your appearance, take a decision to take drums or not take drums. Here's the thing. We're finally at a point in life where, for many of us, the attention that we used to put out to other things and other people and other places is now, for very real reasons, starting to turn inward. So I was talking to somebody the other day about, the appearance changes, and they're jarring. At least for me, the appearance changes were jarring because I wasn't prepared. Right. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like the injustices just don't stop for us. So it's like every day something changes. And then this person sort of judged me a little bit about wanting to get microneedling. And yes, I've dabbled in Botox and all these things. It's like, what? Hold the phone. The choice is mine. And I don't owe you an explanation. And I don't have to justify it. And I'm not asking for permission. And so take that same mindset and apply it to appearance. I had another conversation with a girlfriend. This was during my time of writing the book, about trucker hats. I show up to her house wearing a trucker hat. I love them. And she's like, ew, a trucker hat. We're too old for that. I think you need a full brim situation. And I was like,
what?
Excuse me? So I've taken it now. It is my personal mission. Every time I see her, I wear a brand new trucker hat. But, if I want to wear a bikini to the beach, I'm going to wear a bikini to the beach. If I want to wear a ratty old sweatshirt and my pajama pants to go to Target, guess what I'm wearing? But it's the mindset that says the choice is mine.
Yeah.
And I don't apologize. I don't ask for permission. I don't wait for validation. The choice is mine. And that, I think, is also a theme that is emerging for a lot of us women in our midlife, whether it's your 30s, and it starts to brew there. 40s, it kind of it's kind of coming to a slow boil. Our 50s, we're boiling, and it carries forward into our 60s and 70s and 80s because of the choices we're making now.
Your comment about wearing the ratty sweatshirt and sweatpants to Target, I probably wouldn't have done that 10 years ago, but I would do that now because I don't give an F what people think.
Because I don't give an F. I wouldn't have done it in my 20s and 30s. No. But now I don't give an F what people think.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that, again, I think that, the universe just has a way of connecting all these dots for us in many ways. The oldest real girl that I spoke to in the book, I interviewed her. She's 82. She wrote her first book when she was in her late 70s. And it was a book about grief because she had lost her second husband. And she decided that she was going to write a book in her late 70s about the grieving process. And through that process, she also began to write poetry. So she's working on a second book of poetry. However, so I'm talking to her and I interview her for the book, and and she went on to find new love at 80. And I said, what's been the most surprising thing about finding love at this age? And basically she said that the parts still work and I like it. And I thought, okay, that was it was right about the time of this whole libido thing for me. And that was another point in time where the choice, it reaffirmed this idea that the choice is mine to make. So if I'm unsatisfied with my libido, if I don't want to be in my 60s and 70s and 80s with that out of my life, if I make a choice that says I'm good without it, again, I don't owe anybody an explanation, but I don't want that for myself. So I'm going to choose to fix it.
Yeah.
Equally as somebody who decides, I'm good.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. But it's I don't owe the world an apology. I don't owe the world an explanation. And I don't need to seek permission.
You brought up grief, and that was one of my questions. In grieving who you were and loving who you are, you speak honestly about identity loss. What version of yourself did you personally have to grieve?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look, grief comes from a lot of dimensions, right? You can grieve marriages. You can grieve old identities. You can grieve the noise of a busy household. You can grieve the life that you thought you were going to have. And for me, I think I did. I sort of envisioned my life. I believed in my 20s I wasn't going to get married. I didn't really want to have kids. And then I met a man. I was like, I can get married, and kid thing sounds really good. And I sort of projected how, what was my life going to be like at 50 and 60 and 70 and 80. And when we made the decision to divorce, that was a loss, right? This idea of who I was going to be and the life I was going to have. And I grieved that. And yet what I realized was, the further that I tried to push that away, or the longer I took to just acknowledge how I was feeling, the longer it took for me to get to acceptance. So, I had to acknowledge, I feel sad about this thing. And that kind of moved me to acceptance. And then I sort of needed to shift my mindset in a way that says, grief or change is not a failure. I don't look at my marriage and consider it a failure. I don't. I look at that time and I think, hey, something wasn't working. I'm going to embrace a new definition of right. There's no one way to do this. I'm going to embrace a new definition of what right looks like for me. And yes, I can feel sad about that. Yes, I could grieve the idea of the life I thought I was going to have, but now it is not a failure. And I'm taking action. Even a small step forward to something new is liberating. Mm-hmm. And I believed at that time that good things come from change. Good things come from doing something different. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I believed that at my core. But it was, and even now, even the identity thing, I'm noticing my hair is thinning, which is just again, the injustices. Are you for real?
Yeah. Let's just add that one to the list.
Just add it to the list. And not that I ever had this thick, voluminous hair, but, and I'm lucky because I have the curls, so it kind of can disguise some of the thinning. But it's, I liked my hair when it was a little bit more voluminous.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad. It's like, I see too much. And then my kid, my 15-year-old's like, Mom, I can see a little scalp here. And it's like,
thanks, honey.
Right. That makes me sad, right? But it's not a failure. I'm not failing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I decide that I'm not happy with it, I will make a change. But that's on me. Like, I get to decide to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out too, we don't have to have grief or have those feelings to feel like we want to step into a midlife expansion, right?
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. But I do think, if I look back at different points of my life, there were the signs were there, right? If I look back at different points in my life, it might have been, the other thing that I really work on a lot is saying no, because my pattern was always, I have to say no with like an essay or some sort of dissertation. And it's like, I'm not available. That's 3 words. Like, that's kind of all I owe anybody. But, I think that if I look back, the signs were there that something in me was shifting. I would say yes to things I wanted to say no to. It's no wonder I was constantly tired. Or, looking back, I could start to see nothing dramatic or tragic, but I could start to see that I slowly wasn't recognizing myself in my own life. Or a lot of the traits that I feel I have that I really love, I'm persistent, I'm resilient, I'm all these things, those were disappearing. Like, I didn't really see me in the same way. And those, if I just quieted my life and I started to see those things, I think the signs are there. But for many of us, we ignore the signs, or we don't give ourselves the quiet to just notice them. And that, and I firmly believe that this whole transition that many of us are on, it's not about blowing up your whole life. And you don't have to have a perfect plan for everything. But if you give yourself the ability to just quiet the noise and look for the signs, and if the signs are there and you're going, yeah, why am I saying yes to so many things I really want to say no to?
Yeah.
Okay. Acknowledging that and then saying what you need out loud, even if it's to yourself, that changes your thought pattern and your action pattern. But if I'm honest, I think a lot of the signs were there in my 30s and in my 40s, but I just didn't pay attention to them.
Yeah, you said that you've always felt like you had to have this long dissertation whenever you would say no to something. And I think we tend to do that. We're like, well, I'm really tired and I gotta get up early in the morning and it's just been a rough week and I really don't think I should go. And instead of just saying, hey, it really just doesn't work for me tonight, I'm gonna take a pass.
Yeah. Or the other one, asking for rest.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I thought the idea of asking for rest, and I'm so sorry, like, I've noticed this new wave of menopause, every orifice that I have is now dry. My nose gets so itchy. So I'm scratching my nose because it's so itchy. But, it's this idea of asking for rest and saying, I'm tired. Like, somehow I view that as a weakness. But there are days, like, I actively work on this practice. And this is how it plays out. I'm going about my day and I'm like, man, I'll say it out loud. I'm really tired. I need a nap. Nobody's home, but I say it out loud to myself because that breaks the thought pattern, right?
Yep.
And then what am I going to do with that? Well, I'm going to go sit down and I'm going to take a rest. If I'm not available, that's a good way. I use that. That's 3 words to say no.
Yeah.
I'm not available. I need a break. 4 words. I disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times in a corporate setting I'd be sitting in meetings and I would be listening to these executives argue a point and I could see the solution so clearly in my head. Or I could see the 7 risks that their solution presented. But I'd sit back on my opinion because I'm like, who am I to think I could say it? They're not going to listen to me. I'm too junior. I disagree. That's 2 words.
Yep. And I'm telling you, I turned 62 this week.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. And I love being in my 60s because I now have balls
Yep.
that I didn't have in my 40s. And I don't stay quiet.
Nope.
Any longer.
No.
And it's way more fun.
It's way more fun. And that's the thing. Like, it doesn't have to start with this big, massive declaration or this massive plan or this massive set of changes. It can start with a simple sentence, right? Deciding, hey, I'm going to practice saying no to things. Okay, cool. This week, make a commitment to yourself. If something comes up that you want to say no to, when it comes up to yourself, say out loud, I don't want to do this. That alone is huge because it's going to interrupt your thought pattern. Then practice some response. I'm not available. 3 words.
Yeah.
I can't make it. 4 words. The other thing that I had to start doing was like, if somebody would ask me to do something, it'd be like, I don't want to do that thing, but here's what I can do. Here's what I can do. 5 words.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's a sentence. It's not a big, you're not blowing up your life. You're not going out and spending, $90,000 on a midlife crisis car. You're not, making an appointment for a massive, full plane facelift. You're starting with a sentence.
Yeah. And I think it's what it is. It's just prioritizing yourself. Prioritizing yourself doesn't have to cost money.
It really doesn't.
But I will say that many of my listeners are they're prioritizing strength, mobility. They're really looking at long-term health and longevity. In your view, how does physical strength intersect with that emotional confidence in midlife?
I think that they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Our mind and our body are completely connected, right? And when we make decisions to alter our mindset and our psychology and our behavior follows. So for me, I'll give you a great example. I've always been a very active person, but I distanced myself from things like weightlifting and strength training for a long time. I wish I wouldn't have. I wish I would have embraced those things earlier because the benefits are so proven. But I think the other thing that happens though is when we start, because I know a lot of women, and I did it too when I was in my 20s and 30s and you have these young kids, and I can't take time to go to the gym. I can't take time to work out. I'm not gonna, I don't have time to make these glorious nutrient-filled meals, 3 meals a day for, 5 different people in my household because nobody likes the same thing. Like, I certainly can't prioritize these things that are going to give me longevity, because somebody else would suffer. And I think that the mindset shift that we're seeing a lot of women in our age bracket make is it's that whole proverbial, you put your mask on first before you put others on in an airplane, right? Mm-hmm. When the mind gets right, our behavior changes. And the link between our mind and our desires to then how we physically behave to then how we act is there. And when we start putting ourselves first and we start believing that our wants and our desires should come first, our actions will follow. And whether that's prioritizing your health, prioritizing the medical care you're giving yourself, whether it's prioritizing rest or exercise or nutrition over keeping everybody else satisfied, like you're putting your mask on first. And I think where we sometimes fall is when we're only paying attention to the psychology and the behavior's not following, or we only pay attention to the behavior, but our mindset hasn't shifted. So to me, that mind-body link is essential.
Yeah. And I do believe that reclaiming your body at this stage in life is reclaiming your voice.
Absolutely.
Because so much of our self-confidence is in how we feel about our bodies. And if you take that time to start reclaiming that, I think it does give you more of a voice. Like you feel that you've really got like control of things more.
That's the thing. I think what it does is it gives you control. It gives you strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're physically strong, right? And you're physically strong and you're physically rested and you're physically caring for this vehicle that is your body, you emotionally can manage and regulate so much better, right? And when you feel these things, and I know for me, I feel more confident. I feel more solid. I feel more secure when my body feels solid and confident and secure. And when I'm doing the things to take care of that, I'm inherently putting myself first on the list. And by doing that, it just changes my outlook, right? I'm then viewing myself differently. I view my place in the world differently. I view what I expect from others differently because I'm caring for myself. So if I'm, and I think the inverse is true too. Like if I look back in my 30s, I was so focused on giving attention to everybody else because I felt like I had to. that I didn't turn it to myself. But the minute I started turning attention back to myself, whether it was emotionally, spiritually, physically, I then became a priority in my own life. And as silly as that sounds, that shift had to happen. And then caring for my body, caring for my nutrition meant that I was stronger. I was physically stronger. And when I felt physically stronger, it was like I then am taking up more space in my physical life, in my emotional life, in my spiritual life, in my, in every part of my life, really. So these things just sort of, I think, go hand in hand. And I think you're absolutely right. We can't undervalue the taking care of our physical needs.
Right. Yeah. So important. So if a woman listening right now feels stuck, where does she begin?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. One of the things in my book I talk about is, I end the book with this concept of a manifesto. And it's, for me, it's kind of about how we can adapt and start prioritizing our own needs. So, and I did this myself, is, you can start with one simple thing, and that is just pause and think of one thing that you'd like to be done carrying and one thing that you'd like to reclaim. That becomes a person, and write it down, physically write it down. That becomes a personal contract to yourself. So is there something that you want to let go of? A belief, a habit, an expectation? And is there something that you want to begin, that you want to stand in, that you want to embrace? Write those things down. And that shift alone, just the virtue of thinking of one thing in each of those categories and physically writing it down, could change everything. And that doesn't take time. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take a lot of attention. It just takes a focus on yourself.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to start. It's so simple.
So simple.
It's not a whole vision board or something like that.
It's not a vision board. It's just one thing. Like for me, the thing that I've been working on a lot is, because I was sort of raised with this belief that I was, I was the peacekeeper. I was the load carrier. I was the problem fixer. I was the solution person. And I had to realize that belief about myself kind of railroaded my life in a lot of ways that I feel like I didn't fully control. So I'm really trying to unwind from that. And the thing that I'm starting to embrace is this idea of just saying no. I don't need to explain myself. And so those are the things that I've written down. And those are the things that I hold as a contract to myself. So when I feel the pull toward fixing somebody's problem, when I feel the pull toward having to be responsible for like the emotional regulation of everybody around me, I stop.
Yeah.
I go, okay, what am I doing?
Love it.
Or when I feel the pull, like all of a sudden I'm like saying yes to something that I really don't want to do. It's like, something in my body's changing. Like usually I get kind of not a pit in my stomach, but my stomach kind of starts to turn a little bit and I feel like heaviness in my chest. And it's like, wait, I think I just said yes to something I didn't want to do. Like, what's going on? I need to tune into like something's wrong. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
I'm not available. 3 words.
Yep. I love it.
And those aren't big, massive changes, right?
No.
But they're important ones.
It's just really about being true to ourselves. So I think
it really is
great advice. What's one thing you wish you knew when you first entered midlife?
Oh man, you're going to ask me to pick one thing. Okay, I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to say a couple of things. I wish that I would have known that it was never a midlife crisis. It was just about clarity. I wish that I would have believed at the times when I was going through a lot of the change, I was never falling apart, because there were times where I felt like I was. Mm-hmm. I really wasn't. I wish that somebody would have told me that my body was going to change a whole lot faster than my mindset, because man, some of those changes hit hard and they're furious. I wish, a lot of those old stories that either people had written about me or I had written about myself, I wish I would have really challenged those earlier.
It's not too late.
No. And I'm doing that now, but I do wish I would have challenged those a little bit earlier. But I think, and you're not alone. And also you're not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all great.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
Well, so the book is out. I'm working on a companion book now, which will be out in the spring. So that's very exciting. I write for my Substack So realgirlsguidetomidlife.com. I write like 3 things a week, which is really fun. And yeah, just getting to meet amazing women like you and have these amazing conversations. I just hope to be doing more of that. And yeah, and more drum lessons.
Yeah, and more drum lessons.
Yeah.
That's so fun. I love it.
Yeah.
And then finally, I ask all my guests this. So we're going to strip away all the buzzwords. What is one self-care non-negotiable you protect at this stage of life, even when it could disappoint others?
It's sleep, honestly. When I'm tired, I go to bed. And if that means that, somebody doesn't get to do something that they want to do, last night is a really good example. My son at 8:00 last night, I had just flown in from Atlanta. I gave a workshop based on a theme of my book at a company. So I flew in from Atlanta. I was exhausted. So I'm on East Coast time. I was up from like 2:30 a.m. Pacific time, and it's now 8 a.m. Pacific time. And my son's like, Mom, I really need to go to Target. I need to get something. And I said, no. And he's like, but. And I said, no. I said, look, this isn't urgent for you. And I'm tired and I'm not doing it. And I'm going to bed now.
Yeah.
And that's all I said.
Yeah. Don't have to make a bunch of excuses.
I don't. Oh, and he was like, but. And I could tell he was disappointed. But so for me, it's rest.
Yeah.
It's rest and sleep.
Sleep is becoming one of the more commonly stated non-negotiables that I'm hearing from my guests. So I think we're all starting to really, understand that we aren't our best selves when we don't get enough sleep, period, end of story.
Oh, and we never were. And I think when we were younger, I know for me and a lot of the women that I talked to in the book, it was easy to justify lack of sleep. Kids are young, everybody's sick, I'm working, I'm this, I'm that, I'm having to, I'm trying to be the best mom and the best wife and the best, career woman and the best, and you could kind of go, of course I'm not sleeping. Like, yeah, I remember my mom used to say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And it's like, no, that's actually not. And I think we're also getting smart and we understand that our ability to be strong and our ability to exercise and take good care of ourselves is predicated on being rested. And we're now becoming more educated on the power of rest and sleep on things like our health and longevity. So, I think we're just getting smarter about it, but I know I could easily, I can get by on, 4 hours sleep and 4 cups of coffee a day and everything's going to be fine. And now it's like, I'm not trading that anymore.
Nope. I agree. Nope. And we're on the same page.
Love it.
Angela Burk, where can the listeners find the Real Girl's Guide to Midlife and you and the rest of your work?
Oh, that's such a great question. So Real Girl's Guide to Midlife is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places that you love to buy your books. I write on Substack, so you could go to realgirlsguidetomidlife.com. You subscribe by putting in an email address. It's very low risk and not a lot of effort. I'm on Instagram at realgirlsguide55. I post really cringy reels and try to keep up on Instagram. The socials are just super scary for me and very uncomfortable. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. Angela Burk, good luck with the companion book this spring.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before you go, thank you for being here. If you want to go a little deeper, make sure you check out the show notes for this episode. That's where I link anything we mentioned, resources, partners, or tools I actually use and trust. And if you're not already on the Asking for a Friend community newsletter, that's where I share practical midlife tips, favorite finds, recipes, and the things that don't always make it onto the podcast or Instagram. You'll find the link to join in the show notes. Take care, and I'll see you next week.